The air hung heavy in the courtroom, thick with the scent of aged wax and centuries of untold stories settling as dust. The cold marble floor reflected the pale light filtering through tall, arched windows, illuminating the reverent silence that preceded the judge's entry. It was a stillness pregnant with anticipation, a fleeting calm before the storm of human emotion and legal reckoning. Into this solemn tableau, Victor Almeida, the self-assured CEO of VTX Tech, intruded with a blatant ostentation that seemed to actively challenge the room's dignity. His immaculately tailored charcoal suit, cut with precision, seemed to almost hum with the hum of expensive fabric. The heavy gold wristwatch on his wrist caught the wan light with an almost arrogant glint, a silent testament to his perceived status. Everything about him exuded a self-assurance that didn't just border on insolence, it fully embraced it. He chewed gum with a slow, deliberate cadence, the quiet popping sound a small, irritating punctuation in the hushed chamber. His eyes, devoid of genuine curiosity, swept the room with ill-concealed disdain, as if every passing second here was a precious commodity stolen from his empire of profit and power. He was here for a mere fine, an insignificant corporate infraction that, in his mind, should be resolved with a wave of his hand and a swiftly written check, a trivial annoyance to be swatted away. Seated opposite, on the hard, polished bench reserved for the plaintiff, was Clara Mendez. Her simple, slightly rumpled clothes, though clean, seemed to shrink against the stark opulence of Victor's attire. They couldn't, however, conceal the gentle, undeniable swell of her belly, where a new life nested, a quiet promise of a future. Her eyes, large and weary, carried the palpable weight of a silent battle, a poignant mixture of profound exhaustion and a tenacious flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. She deliberately avoided Victor's gaze, the fresh sting of recent humiliation still a sharp physical pang in her chest. The echo of harsh, dismissive words delivered in a cold, mirrored office still vibrating in her ears. Her sole profound solace was the faint, rhythmic beat of her unborn child's heart, a tiny, persistent drum of life, a promise of a future she clung to with fierce, unyielding determination. From his dark, imposing wooden bench at the front, Judge Frank Caprio observed. His gaze, piercing yet compassionate, didn't merely skim the surface of the facts laid out in sterile legal briefs. Instead, it seemed to plumb the very souls before him, sensing the deep currents of character and conflict. He noted the vivid, almost theatrical contrast. Victor's defiant arrogance, a shield of materialism, against Clara's quiet vulnerability, a raw exposure of human struggle. He felt the tension in the air, thick and palpable, a metallic tang of injustice lingering, not just in the air, but in the very core of the individuals present. For Victor, this courtroom was a temporary inconvenience, a minor transactional hiccup. For Clara, it was the precipice of her dignity, a desperate plea for recognition. Judge Frank Caprio, with his peculiar, profound wisdom, understood implicitly that the drama unfolding here would be less about the letter of the law and more about the crucible of the human spirit, and he was profoundly ready to guide that arduous journey. The hushed reverence of the courtroom, where the air still carried the faint metallic tang of an old radiator and the dry, papery scent of ancient legal tomes, began to recede. In its place, memory, sharp and unbidden, flooded the senses, transporting the scene back to the shrill cacophony of a chaotic morning. The pristine, impeccably polished corridors of VTX Tech, usually only disturbed by the ceaseless hum of servers and the gentle clinking of gourmet espresso cups, now vibrated with a different kind of tension. Clara, her body a vessel at 8 months pregnant, felt the heavy, insistent throb of each step. Nights of fitful sleep and the persistent gnawing morning sickness had left her perpetually weary. On this particular morning, an unforeseen complication during her routine ultrasound had led to an unavoidable delay. The city bus, already overflowing with the resigned faces of morning commuters, lumbered through the urban sprawl like a wounded beast. With every jolt, Clara's stomach churned, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over her. The gnawing fear of not making it on time, the palpable dread of the inevitable fine she knew awaited her. The acrid scent of diesel fumes and the humid closeness of strangers' sweat clung to her, a stark, unpleasant contrast to the sterile, almost clinical aroma of the doctor's office she had just left, where a fragile sense of relief had mingled with an undercurrent of deepening worry. It was merely 15 minutes, but for Victor Almeida, those minutes were a capital offense, a cardinal sin against the sacred tenets of productivity and VTX Tech's vaunted culture of excellence. When Clara finally stepped into the sleek, minimalist expanse of the office, Victor's gaze was already fixed upon her. He stood there, an imposing silhouette against the floor-to-ceiling windows, before his gleaming glass desk, arms tightly crossed, jaw a rigid line. His voice, when it finally cut through the sterile quiet, was a sibilant whip. "Ms. Mendez, punctuality is a fundamental pillar of this company. Your condition is not an excuse for the disregard of company policy. This fine will be applied, and frankly, I hope it serves as a lesson." The words echoed, not just within the room's cool confines, but deep within Clara's mind, piercing her already fragile armor. A knot tightened in her throat, tears stinging the back of her eyes. How could he be so utterly devoid of empathy? Could he not see the new life stirring within her? The daily struggle to balance profound responsibilities with her own precarious health? Victor, in turn, felt a familiar prickle of satisfaction. Rules are rules, he thought, his eyes following Clara's retreating, dejected figure. I cannot allow empathy to compromise efficiency. I must be the example. The vivid flash of that moment, the scent of expensive coffee, the biting chill of public humiliation, still clung to Clara like a dark, oppressive cloud as she sat in the cold marble gravitas of the courtroom. The tense silence of the courtroom shifted, becoming a stage for Victor Almeida. Summoned to the defendant's stand, he moved with an almost theatrical hauteur, the silky fabric of his bespoke suit murmuring a soft protest with each confident stride. There was an unshakable self-assurance about him, a conviction that his social standing and economic power formed an impenetrable shield against any serious repercussion. His eyes, which had initially swept the room with an air of dominion, now settled on Judge Frank Caprio, a flicker combining superficial respect with a calculated dose of condescension. He continued to chew gum, its gentle snap puncturing the silence like an irritating rhythmic beat. "Mr. Almeida, the court is ready to hear your version of the facts," Judge Frank Caprio declared, his voice calm yet firm, devoid of overjudgment, carrying only the promise of attentive listening. Victor began to speak, his voice resonating with rehearsed clarity. "Your Honor, this is, as I mentioned, an internal company matter that, regrettably, has been brought to this esteemed court. VTX Tech prides itself on excellence, on discipline. Punctuality is a tacit contract with our clients and collaborators. Ms. Mendez, while we understand her situation, infringed upon a clear policy." He attempted to frame the incident as a lamentable but necessary exercise in management. He suggested, with an affected smile, that he had already considered generous compensation for the employee, perhaps a salary advance or a performance bonus, as if money could erase any moral discomfort. "There's no need for further delay, Your Honor. I can assure you the company will handle the problem appropriately. Of course, with due indemnification to avoid any misunderstanding. In his mind, the solution was straightforward. A hefty check would make everything vanish. This judge will see I am a man of influence. Money solves everything. It's not a value judgment, it's a cost calculation. Victor thought, already feeling victorious, almost bored. Clara, from her seat, watched him with tear-filled eyes, the knot in her stomach tightening. This man did not see her, did not see her child. He saw only numbers and problems to be discarded. Judge Frank Caprio, with his astute gaze, perceived the veil of arrogance that enshrouded Victor. The way his words, though polished, were empty of empathy. The slight tension in his shoulders betraying his self-importance. The play had only just begun, and the judge knew the climax would be far more than a simple fine. The courtroom's quietude was punctuated by the measured voice of Judge Frank Caprio, a voice that carried the weight of experience and the calm of deep reflection. He did not dwell on the minutiae of corporate policy or the cold articles of law. Instead, he plunged directly into the heart of the matter, into the morality Victor Almeida so adamantly sought to avoid. His eyes, serene yet penetrating, fixed upon Victor, who, to his own surprise, ceased chewing his gum, as if the judge's sudden turn had disarmed him entirely. "Mr. Almeida," Judge Caprio began, his voice echoing subtly against the marble, "you've spoken extensively about punctuality and efficiency. But tell me, in your worldview, where does human dignity fit into that equation? Can the value of a life, one still forming, be measured in minutes and fines?" Victor attempted to compose himself, a faint sheen of perspiration beginning to bead on his forehead. "Your Honor, I understand the humanitarian point, but business is business. We require rules to maintain order, to ensure the livelihood of hundreds of families. My decisions, however stringent they may appear, are aimed at the greater good of the company, the prosperity of all. It's a matter of financial responsibility, not insensitivity." He tried to deflect, pivoting to metrics, to his generosity in creating employment, to his personal sacrifices in forging his empire. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping a tone, becoming more intimate, almost a whisper that, paradoxically, filled the entire chamber. "And what if that rule, Mr. Almeida, were applied to someone you hold dear? If your own mother, or a paternal figure, in a moment of fragility had been penalized for a justified delay, would your perception of the rule remain the same? Where does the heart find its flexibility when the letter of the law clashes with human necessity?" Victor swallowed hard. His mind raced, scrambling for a rhetorical escape. "He's trying to corner me, to make me look like a monster," he thought. A slight tremor in his hands he tried to hide beneath the bench. "I need to maintain composure. It's all about logic, not emotion." But emotion, Judge Caprio knew, was the gateway to truth. The atmosphere seemed to hum with unspoken tension, a thick quietude settling in. From the gallery, Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. This man wasn't merely upholding a rigid law, he was dissecting a soul. Judge Caprio observed the first visible cracks in the CEO's armor, sensing the scent of fear beginning to mingle with the courtroom's familiar waxen odor. The trap was set, and the judge was poised to spring it. The air in the courtroom grew dense, laden with an expectation almost palpable. Victor Almeida fought to recompose himself, but Judge Frank Caprio's preceding questions had struck a sensitive chord, a dissonance resonating deep within him. He took a deep breath, preparing for yet another rational defense, when the judge, with a deliberate calm more unsettling than any anger, uttered the words that would shatter his meticulously constructed armor. "Mr. Almeida," the judge began, his eyes fixed and profound, "you spoke of rules, of efficiency. But allow me to ask, Miss Clara Mendez, beyond being your employee, is she not also the daughter of Ilara Mendez, the nurse who years ago dedicated herself tirelessly to the care of your father when he was convalescing? The same Ilara who, after an unexpected family emergency, needed to miss a few days of work and was nearly dismissed were it not for the intervention and generosity of a young Victor Almeida, who, at that time, was just beginning his journey and remembered the compassion she had offered to his family." A sepulchral silence descended upon the courtroom. The only sound was Victor's own breathing, which had grown heavy and erratic. The name Ilara Mendez, the name of that kind woman who had been a pillar of strength during one of the most fragile moments of his life, resonated like thunder. He visibly blanched, the blood seemingly draining from his once confident face. His eyes, previously full of arrogance, now expressed profound shock, almost panic. The gum, finally, had been forgotten, his jaw now locked in a spasm of disbelief. He looked at Clara, and for the first time he did not see a tardy employee, not a number. He saw Ilara's daughter, the granddaughter of compassion, a mirror of a past he had conveniently and cruelly forgotten. The armor carefully built around his ego cracked, revealing the wound of hypocrisy. In his mind, a voice screamed, "No, not her, not like this. How did he know? How could I have forgotten?" The room seemed to spin, and the familiar smell of wax and dust now mingled with the metallic tang of his own fear. Judge Caprio, with his revelation, had not merely exposed a fact. He had torn away Victor's mask, revealing the man beneath the CEO. The man who had betrayed his own history, his own legacy of gratitude. The judge's words struck Victor Almeida like a lightning bolt, dismantling his polished facade with brutal efficiency. The silence in the courtroom was oppressive, a stark witness to a soul in turbulent disarray. Victor, who moments before had worn an affected smirk, now stood with a face pale as alabaster, his forehead glistening with cold sweat. His breath was shallow, almost inaudible in the drawn-out hush. The image of Ilara Mendez, the nurse who had cared for his father with such devotion, fused with the fragile, pregnant figure of Clara. It was an uncomfortable mirror, a betrayal not merely of ethics, but of the very memory of his own ascent, of the gratitude upon which his empire had supposedly been built. The judge's words struck Victor Almeida like a lightning bolt, dismantling his polished facade with brutal efficiency. The silence in the courtroom was oppressive, a stark witness to a soul in turbulent disarray. Victor, who moments before had worn an affected smirk, now stood with a face pale as alabaster, his forehead glistening with cold sweat. His breath was shallow, almost inaudible in the drawn-out hush. The image of Ilara Mendez, the nurse who had cared for his father with such devotion, fused with the fragile, pregnant figure of Clara. It was an uncomfortable mirror, a betrayal not merely of ethics, but of the very memory of his own ascent, of the gratitude upon which his empire had supposedly been built. Desperately trying to regain control, Victor forced a semblance of composure. "Your Honor," he began, his voice raspy and unsteady, I wasn't aware of the connection. My offer of compensation, it can be much, much greater. A higher position for Miss Mendez, lifetime financial aid, anything to rectify this error." In his mind, money remained the sole currency of redemption, the only tool to mend what was broken. He still clung to the belief that he could buy his way out of this moral abyss. But Judge Frank Caprio, with a firm yet gentle grace, rejected the attempt. "Mr. Almeida," he said, his voice resonating with an unshakable moral authority, "this court is not here to negotiate monetary values, but to weigh the worth of dignity and humanity. You cannot purchase a conscience, neither your own nor that of others. Your offer, though perhaps well-intentioned now, is a symptom of the same mentality that brought you here. The question is not how much you can pay, but what you have allowed yourself to become." The judge's words stripped Victor of his last refuge. He felt the invisible support that had sustained him, the hollow admiration that had fed his ego, dissipated into the cold air. His reputation as a ruthless leader, once a source of pride, now seemed like the mask of a petty tyrant. The glint of his expensive watch seemed to mock him, an empty reminder of a power that offered no protection from the truth. Panic set in, a chilling void where arrogance had once resided. He looked at those present in the courtroom, the press, Clara's family, the curious onlookers, and felt their eyes pierce his very soul, revealing the monster he feared he had become. "Everything I've built, everything I am, feels like a sandcastle now," he thought, a knot tightening in his gut. Judge Frank Caprio observed the destruction of Victor's ego, a necessary prelude to the reconstruction he hoped to inspire. Victor's carefully constructed empire of self-importance, which only moments ago had felt like a sandcastle, now crumbled completely. The air, heavy with the scent of aged wood and Victor's fading cologne, seemed to shift as the judge's voice, no longer inquisitory but solemn, filled the silent courtroom. "Mr. Almeida," Judge Caprio began, his words echoing with the gravity of a lifetime lesson, "justice in this court transcends the mere imposition of fines. It seeks restoration, rebirth, the rediscovery of the human essence we sometimes forget in our pursuit of power. The fine against Miss Mendez is, effective immediately, revoked. She owes you nothing, Mr. Almeida. You, however, carry a far greater debt, a moral debt, to yourself and to the memory of the kindness that once saved you." Victor listened, head slightly bowed, his eyes fixed on his visibly trembling hands. He was no longer defending, but absorbing. The acrid tang of his own despair mingled with the familiar courtroom wax. Judge Caprio continued, weaving a sentence not of currency, but of lived experience. "Therefore, Mr. Almeida, your reparation will be experiential. I sentence you to 3 months of intensive community service, not behind an office desk, but in a place where humanity in its most vulnerable form reveals itself, a home for single mothers and needy pregnant women. You will assist them in their daily routines, witnessing their struggles and their small victories, a minimum of 20 hours weekly. Each month, you will present me with a detailed report, not of tasks performed, but of lessons learned and hearts touched. And, if Miss Mendez permits, you will accompany her to at least 2 of her prenatal appointments to truly understand the miracle and the challenge she carries." A profound stillness settled. Judge Caprio's gaze held Victor's. "Power, Mr. Almeida, lies not in the capacity to accumulate, but to share. Not to dominate, but to serve. True wealth is not measured in assets, but in acts of kindness. Your arrogance blinded you, but humanity can be your light. This is not a punishment. This is an opportunity to redeem your ego, to rebuild your soul, to discover the true meaning of being human." Clara, her hands resting protectively on her belly, wept silently, tears of relief and gratitude washing away months of pain. Victor finally raised his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by an expression of disorientation, yet, perhaps, a glimmer of something new, a fragile spark of hope amidst the ruins of his ego. Judge Caprio's gavel descended, its sound not an end, but the resonant echo of a beginning. Months later, the heavy scent of baby powder and freshly laundered linens had replaced the sterile tang of Victor's office. The polished gleam of his executive shoes had given way to worn sneakers, often dusted with flour from the communal kitchen or damp from scrubbing floors. He spent his days at the home for expectant mothers, helping with everything from organizing donations to comforting a new mother struggling with a crying infant. The gold watch, once a symbol of his dominion, now remained hidden beneath the cuff of a simple shirt, forgotten. He had learned the subtle art of listening, of offering a steady hand without expectation, of witnessing the quiet strength in vulnerability. Each weekly report to Judge Frank Caprio was not a task to be checked off, but a deeply personal reflection, filled with moments that chipped away at the last vestiges of his old self. Clara, now the mother of a healthy baby girl named Esperanza, found solace and renewed purpose. The prenatal appointments Victor had attended, initially strained and silent, had slowly transformed. He observed the flutter of life within her, felt the doctor's steady hand, and saw in Clara's tired but determined eyes a reflection of his own mother's unwavering spirit. After Esperanza's birth, Clara became an impassioned advocate for other mothers. Her voice, once timid, now strong and clear, speaking out against systemic injustices. She joined the board of the very home Victor now served, her presence a quiet reminder of the justice Judge Caprio had orchestrated. One crisp autumn afternoon, Victor was helping to set up a small garden behind the home when he saw Clara approaching, pushing Esperanza in a stroller. Her smile was soft, genuine, a stark contrast to the strained politeness of their initial court encounters. The scent of damp earth and budding flowers filled the air, a metaphor for new beginnings. "Victor," she said, her voice gentle, "Esperanza and I wanted to thank you. This garden, it means so much to the women here." He straightened, a genuine, humble smile touching his lips. "Clara," he replied, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "No, thank you, for being the mirror I so desperately needed, for teaching me that true wealth isn't accumulated, but shared." He looked down at Esperanza, a tiny hand reaching out to grasp a fallen leaf. "And thank you for letting me witness the miracle you carry." Clara nodded, her eyes warm. "Thank you, Victor," she said, her gaze meeting his, "for choosing to see the reflection and for choosing to change." The moral justice saga had concluded, its final pages written not in legal decrees, but in the quiet, profound transformation of a man's heart. Judge Frank Caprio's legacy echoed not from the bench, but in the redemption blooming in a small community garden, a testament to the enduring power of empathy over ego and the human capacity for rebirth.